So I want to welcome everyone to Franchising 101. We have Dana Hall today from FranNet. I've been working with Dana for several years now. He does a great job explaining the franchise process and the things that you should know, myths and facts and all those things. So we're very happy to partner with him and have him here to talk to you today. Um, whoops, I lost apologize for that. I do want to explain to you what Boston Business Mentors is about. We are a volunteer organization. All our mentors are volunteers. They have a wide variety of experiences and skill sets, things that they've learned from their own business experiences, whether it was through success or failure. And they are there to assist you. They can be your soundboard, they can be an idea generator, they can be an accountability mentor. They can just be someone that can make sure that you're on the right path and make sure that you're progressing to your goals, whether your goal is to get a business started or to grow an existing business or to exit a business. So, if you've never had a business mentor, they are free. They're always free. We never charge for mentoring. Please consider scanning that QR code and getting a mentor today. Certainly, we support businesses in other ways through our workshops, through information on our website. We have a lot of really great blogs that on our website and materials. And of course, our workshops, we're always adding new topics. We have a lot of really up-to-date and relevant topics, plus the tried and true funding and pricing and all those marketing workshops as well. So watch for our newsletter for that information. So I'm going to go ahead. That's really all I'm going to say about Boston Business Mentors today. And I'm going to turn it over to Dana.
Teresa, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I
You're
will
welcome.
advance this. Give a brief introduction of myself. So my name is Dana Hall. I am a franchise consultant with a firm called FranNet. I'll explain who FranNet is in a minute. I have a pretty extensive background in the franchise space on several different levels. For several years, I operated in the franchise world through finance. I was in the corporate finance for Wendy's and Panera Bread. I worked for another company for several years as a franchise business consultant, helping franchise business owners for that brand. And currently, I am the franchisee for FranNet here in the Boston area, so supporting folks in pretty much all of New England. So, got a background in franchising on many different levels. So, who is FranNet? We are a franchise consulting firm, which means we help people understand their options in franchise business. And I'll again further explain that in a minute. Several of us across the country, we work with only top quality franchise companies when we match people. I'll explain what matching is in a minute. And um, we work with these other organizations, but Boston Business Mentors is truly a hidden gem. These are executive level, very experienced folks that can help you as a potential business owner navigate all sorts of different challenges. So you will be in good hands if you work with Boston Business Mentors and have somebody guide you. And you can't beat the price. It's free. They're volunteers, but they're highly experienced. So what we specifically do at FranNet, and then we'll get into, understanding the franchise model. Um, we educate folks, we give them information, help them understand the landscape, what a franchise is, what it is, what are the challenges, its pros and cons. So there's a lot of education. And for those folks that decide that this is a career path, an alternative career path to maybe the corporate world, we will help them understand what they're good at, what what they should experience they should use, what transferable skills they have, and ultimately, if they're looking to pursue small business ownership in a franchise model, we'll help match them with a good, solid franchise company, reputable, that meets their goals and also their skills and their background. So we're matchmakers. And all of this, just like my friends Teresa and Boston Business Mentors, we don't charge. Um, we are, we don't take a retainer, a fee up front, so that the client never pays. I would get paid a commission by the franchise company that you would potentially end up owning. And what's really key for me to always articulate to folks is I'm not here to sell anybody anything. We don't sell franchises. We help guide people, um, help them make choices and help them make informed decisions, and then match them with those companies. Now, should you become a franchisee and choose to buy, you're doing that with that company. So I'm not here to sell you anything. I'm here to be the Sherpa, so to speak, and guide you through it. All right, so let's get in the meat of it, 40 minutes or so. Please, I believe we're able to throw questions in the chat. We can certainly hopefully take some questions at the end if you have any. But I'm going to talk a little bit about the why. Um, your three major options, debunk some myths, hopefully, and then discuss a little bit about how you would begin to think about putting a business model for yourself together to say what kind of business would make sense. Would a restaurant make sense? Would a consulting company make sense? Or make my own consulting firm? Would a sign company? There's so many options. So we have a very rigorous sort of and disciplined process to help you determine that. So this is the question I always ask my clients first, if they're considering this path, and it's the why. Why would you even be considering this? And usually it's at some level trying to determine what success is for me. And success is not just money, it's lifestyle, it's being fulfilled, it's being independent potentially, it's having flexibility, the work-life balance. Um, Possibly for a lot of my clients are former executive, corporate world folks, but maybe they've been through one or more layoffs, and that's stressful, and that isn't stable. So maybe they're looking to alleviate that fear of, being laid off again. Financial security. Sure, there's risk in a business, but there's risk in being laid off as well. So financial security is something that's a consideration, and you have more control potentially over that owning a business. So it's key to understand, if you're considering it, the really deep why. Why was this something that could make sense for you? And that's different for everybody. All right, so let's talk about what the different options are. It's America, right? We're entrepreneurs, a lot of us, not everybody, but in a economy like ours, starting your own business, this is what part of the country was founded on, right? So starting it from scratch, building your own business, potentially buying an existing business. Think about it like a home. People live in homes and then they move for whatever reason, and there's what's called a secondary market. So buying and selling homes. Businesses are the same way. So there's a whole world of existing businesses that are for sale at any given time. And the third one will be potentially a franchise. So let's talk real quickly about just some of the pros and cons, things to think about. This is part of the topic of this webinar, right? Options and considerations. So the advantages, and this is not, a complete exhaustive list, but key things to think about. If you're starting your own business, on the plus side, obviously you have total control. It's yours. You make all the decisions. You can be creative on any aspect of it. There's no rules. You're not sharing this with anybody, so there's the largest upside. And for many folks, it's sort of I've always wanted to do this sort of thing, the passion play. So there's some, a short list of advantages there. And again, it's not exhaustive. What are some of the things on the potentially negative side to think about? You, you do have to create sort of everything, right? It is from scratch. So you have to wear a lot of hats. That's where an organization like Boston Business Mentors would be a massive help to help you think through all those different things. The financial part of it, depending on what type of business, that can be a challenge. Going to a bank with an idea, that's a tough, if that used to be something, years and years and years ago, that's a lot more difficult now, from a funding standpoint. Certainly a slower ramp up because you're sort of, trial and error and making mistakes and figuring things out along the way. And relative to, an established franchise or buying a proven existing business, there likely is a higher a failure rate there. If you buy an existing business that's been operating, the pizza joint down the street for, 10 years, 15 years, and you take over and operate it the same way, the likelihood for success is pretty high, right? Opening it on your own, um, there's a little less known. So it's a little bit of the unknown factor in terms of the failure rate. Okay, let's talk about an existing business. Some really specific, pros and cons here. And again, think about a house. It's been somebody else's house for 10 years or whatever. Same thing with a business. But with an existing business, there should be some track record, some documentation, right? So the advantages are in a good business, there should be cash flow that should be, unless it's distressed. So this is all part of the due diligence, but hopefully a solid, good existing business will have cash flow. It will have goodwill, hopefully with, customers and employees for that matter. Actual financial results. This is really key. Tax returns, profit and loss statements, a trail, so to speak, of its performance. That means it's attractive, relatively speaking, to lenders because that's what they want to lend on. Market is established, again, in a good business. You have a customer base, employees, and hopefully there's some systems there that it's been documented to some level. So you as a new owner, have something to lean on, as you're operating it. Disadvantages. Now, here's the flip side to, okay, why is somebody selling it? If they're retiring, they're geographically moving, there's a health issue, these are all legitimate reasons for somebody to want to sell their business. If they're just trying to dump it and it's not a solidly performing business, maybe it doesn't have cash flow, maybe it's losing money, maybe it has a poor reputation. Um, the real other concern that's difficult for the average person to understand is what do I pay for it? It could be overpriced. So you would need help understanding what's an appropriate price for the business. Is there a training and support system? You'd have to worry a little bit about employees finding out and saying, well, I don't want to work for this new owner. The real one here that's tough to get to the details, and you have to do a fair amount of due diligence, is truly why they're selling. Are there hidden seller motives here? So getting, the true reason why somebody is looking to sell is key, and that can be difficult to get to. And then ultimately, if it is a good business, it's going to cost you, right? That person or persons have worked hard, sweat equity to build the business. So that's something, just like a home has equity in it, a business does too. So there's a trade-off there of you're going to have to pay for it. That's where that high debt service line comes in. And that could be fine. Just know that, if you were to build a business, money out of pocket is not going to be as much as if you paid, an existing operating solid business. There's a premium to that. And finally, a franchise business, that this is sort of your third leg of options. Um, Advantages and disadvantages here. Uh, in many cases, there's name recognition, all the brand names that we know. There should be some intellectual property around that, right? So license and trademarks and logos and, websites, that sort of thing. One of the key things about a franchise is the reason you would be buying into it, paying a franchise fee and being part of that system, is that it has a proven business model. There's a proven system here that's been replicated by other franchisees. That would be the reason to do it and not do it on your own, right? So a roadmap, right? A proven system with really strong training and support. That the franchisor should be there to get you up to speed, to train you, to onboard you, to support you initially and ongoing. And because of that, in good franchises, there are bad ones. But with those, really quality franchise companies that have a track record of success, there is a lower failure rate. Hey, if you come in, operate to our standard, follow our system, the likelihood of success is fairly high. It also should be lower cost because you're not sort of figuring things out with your own pocketbook. They should know what it costs for a lease or what products to have or what inventory to have and what fixed assets to have and what the best price is. So it should be a lower cost, relatively speaking. There typically are really good financing options because, these are established, well-known companies to banks and to lenders. So they're known to the lenders, and therefore they're more likely to lend to a solid franchise company. There's disclosure, which I'll talk about in a few slides from now. That's really important in trying to make your decision. When you're doing due diligence, having information is key. And the last thing would be, this franchise family. You will become part of a system. There'll be other franchisees already in the system, doing it, and then there'll be new ones as that company grows. And these are people you become business peers with. So particularly those that are already operating that franchise, these are people you can call and ask questions on and get advice and guidance and how did you do it? So that's powerful. It's not all perfect, right? There's pros and cons with everything. So the disadvantages are there's not a franchise for everything. If you're out there trying to, decide what it should be, and you have an idea of, what you're interested in, there's a possibility that there's not a franchise for that. They tend to have very structured operating systems. So by nature, they want you to follow their system and they have it documented and, this is what's made us successful. Now there's a spectrum to that. Some are more, lenient. More of it is up to you to sort of, do it your way with their just guardrails. But others are very strict. This is, you do it exactly this way and don't deviate. So that's all part of exploring and the diligence you would do with any company. But no, at some level, for all of the good ones, there's going to be a structured operating system. Territory restrictions. So, you can only operate in a designated territory that you've purchased. That does protect you from somebody else operating that same franchise in your area, but it can also limit you, right? Because you typically are not allowed to operate outside of that area. And there's exceptions to that, but that can be a disadvantage. You can only sell their products. They don't want somebody that owns an Orange Theory Fitness to, bring in their sort of own line of supplements or something and put them on the counter and sell them through the franchise, right? So they're going to be strict about only selling their products and services. And there's a trade-off to all of this, right? If you're going to have a company that supports you, that has a blueprint, a model, a headquarters team, all of this that they've created that you're executing, there's a cost to that. There's a franchise fee and this ongoing royalty payment. So they're going to take a percentage of your typically it's gross sales, percentage of your top line gross sales in exchange for, the business model. So some pros and cons there. So kind of saying it a different way, you know, when thinking about a franchise, why not just do it myself? And these are some of the questions one should ask. And if you have solid answers to a lot of these, and this is not an exhaustive list either, but because I do get a lot of clients that say, well, you showed me a company that manufactures light manufacturing of signs. Well, and graphics. Well, I could buy some printers and get a warehouse, and I could do that on my own. And you're absolutely right. There's plenty of independent sign companies, but these are just some of the things you'd have to ask. And that's why a franchise could be a good option, because a lot of this stuff is figured out. You just need to get up to speed, learn it with their help. So you got to kind of decide, hey, do I want to do this all on my own, and I'm capable of it, and I'm confident in that, and it's my background? Great. But if not, maybe a franchise or an existing business is a good option. All right, so I've said franchise obviously a bunch of times. Yeah, that's the focus sort of the webinar. But so what exactly is it? And the simple legal definition is it's a license agreement. So it is a license for you as a potential franchisee to use all the names, trademarks, business systems, the business, in exchange for that franchise fee up front. It varies, but if you're thinking about the things that we all know and use, retail or food, one location, the franchise fee is usually somewhere either side of 50,000. It could be less, it could be more. If you have multiple locations, obviously it's going to cost more. So there's a franchise fee, and then there's that royalty payment. And again, that's ongoing royalties, meaning if there's a 10-year franchise agreement, which is typical, you would be paying some percentage, 5, 6, 8% of your revenue to them every month or quarterly, however they decide for you to be paying them. But there'll be a franchise fee and that ongoing stream of royalty payments. So at its simplest form, that's what a franchise is. It's a license agreement. So I mentioned earlier disclosure, and I want to bring this up. There's a couple slides here. I won't go through all this, but when trying to determine whether a business is what you'd be interested in, and what would work, and being informed, there's a franchise disclosure document in the franchise industry that helps with that. So back before the federal government initiated this, I think it was in the early 70s, late 60s, early 70s. Before that, there were franchise concepts out there. McDonald's was back in the 50s, but there was really no regulation or oversight into it. And there was good companies like McDonald's, and then there was other rogue ones that they were selling a lot of promises. And so what the government decided was, the Federal Trade Commission actually was, hey, why don't we have some sort of consistent information that somebody would get if they're interested in that company, in that franchise, in that business. So think of it, if you've ever bought a stock or a bond or a mutual fund in the finance world, those companies are required to provide you a prospectus, right? Which tells you what it is they invest in, how much are the fees, all that information to help you make an informed decision, so you know how to compare to something else. So this is what a franchise disclosure document, or the FDD, does. Every single franchise company legally franchised in the US has to submit this every year. They have to update it and to current information. And these are the things that it lets you know, and gives you information to make a decision. This is part of your due diligence process on making an actual business financial decision. Time in business, who are the people that operate it? What's their experience? Have they ever filed for bankruptcy? Have they ever been sued? It's going to give you a very detailed understanding of the costs. So again, full disclosure, right? Transparency is the key here. Um, your investment costs, how much working capital you need. They actually have most of them have this really detailed line item document that says, hey, for one territory, this is going to cost you between $100,000 and $125,000 to get, up and operating and running. And it'll tell you what all that money is going to. So it's pretty detailed. It's going to talk to you about the royalties, how much it is, how they're paid. Obviously, the franchise contract itself is in there. They'll talk about how to define your territory that you're purchasing. Um, here's probably the biggest key beyond all those sort of uh, basic information. In addition to all that, being able to talk to current and past franchisees. So in the diligence process and what I guide clients on, and the good companies will too, they have a series of steps to take you through to help you understand the opportunity, their business. But one of the key steps is being able to talk to existing franchisees out there, being able to call 4, 5, 6 existing franchisees and say, how was your experience? How was the training? How are they to work with? Is it what you anticipated? Is it what they told you? The term that is used in the industry is validation. So you're going to have a series of steps with the franchise company to help educate you up front. This is how we do it. Videos, webinars, one-on-one calls, all that. And then, but that's all from their side. So now you want to hear from somebody that's actually made the investment and is operating the business. And that's the validation piece. And hopefully the goal is that you would hear many of the same things from a current owner as you would the company you're working with, the person that's giving you the information from the company. Validation. So it's a really powerful process or series of data points to help you make a decision. Because if you're talking to 4, 5, 6 other franchisees and they don't seem happy and it's not the same general story you're hearing from the franchisor, that's a red flag. All right, let's talk about some common myths because I'm sure people are thinking, well, there's some things I assume about the franchise space or a franchise business that may or may not be true. And the first and most common one is, okay, owning a business is great. I'm considering it, but I have no interest in, running a restaurant or owning, some other brick and mortar retail sort of type of business. And that is a big part of the industry. And this slide, some of the numbers here are a little old, but it's still representative. But there's thousands of franchise businesses in the U.S. legally franchised, and there's only probably 20 or 20 to 25% is food and retail. A lot of business to business. I think I mentioned sign companies. Is one of them. Digital marketing and media sorts of companies. Think of any business that their customer is another business. So B2B. There's a lot in that space. A lot of concepts in service businesses, both commercial and residential. So commercial would be, landscaping or, commercial cleaning, landscaping for big buildings, window washing, all that sort of thing. But then residential, all those sorts of businesses as well. So anything that would service your home. Automotive, you think about, it's not necessarily food or retail, but, your Meineke, Mako, those sorts of concepts. Personal services. So this could be, massage therapy concepts, a physical therapist type of thing, nail salons. So all sorts of options beyond just food and retail. And one of the things that, people who wouldn't want something that's somewhat recession resistant, not everything is, and there's a spectrum to that. But if you think about some of the different categories where, hey, you got to kind of do it. I mean, your hair grows, you got to get it cut, right? Um, if something needs to be repaired in the home, you got to fix it. Same with your car. God forbid you have a flood. I had that a couple of years ago in my house, unfortunately, and had to have a company come in and mitigate that. Um, there's cleaning services. Senior care is a big industry. Folks that come in and help older folks in their home with some, basic daily things that they can't no longer do themselves. And then over here on the business side, companies that help other companies with their staffing, sales training. So lots of different options. This is always an interesting one because it seems counterintuitive. You don't want to assume whatever you're going to be providing, whether it's a product or service, is not the best. But the point here is not so much to pick on McDonald's or to say that we're not going to offer a great product or service, but the reality is that a lot of concepts is not necessarily just about, hey, I've got the best product in this category. Pick a car. What's the best car in the world? Well, most of us aren't driving that, right? But we're driving something that works for us. It's affordable. It's still reliable, and so it doesn't have to be just the best product. The reason that franchising uh, companies grow and that it works is that they can replicate it. So if you think about McDonald's in this light, they're great marketers. They're world-class trainers. You wouldn't necessarily think that going to a location, but so many of their senior executives started as, line level or management at the location level and worked their way up. So they're great at training. They know where these locations should go. Um, they're excellent at operations. They document and have systems for everything. And then back office, they consolidate and do a real good job. So the reason that a lot of successful franchise companies got that way is because they had systems around all of this and they could repeat it, not necessarily because it was the best product out there. This is a very common one that I can't even consider it because it's too expensive. And the reality is that there's obviously a lot of things that we see driving around are expensive because they've got locations, they've got a lot of equipment, it's a big footprint, they've got a lease. But there's many, many options in the call it 100 to $500,000 range. Now, $500,000 is still a lot of money, but it's not 1.5 or 2 million, which one location of most restaurant concepts would require. So literally thousands of high quality, good businesses, solid businesses that are not seven figures, not $1 million investments. And, most of the companies that my firm works with are in that 100 to a $500,000 range for your total investment. So, it's probably somewhat more approachable than the average person would think. The other thing to point out real quick is, hey, I want to make X amount of money. That means I need to have Y amount of investment. Just know that there's no direct sort of linear correlation between how much you invest and how much you'll make. Just because you invest $2 million in a restaurant doesn't mean it's going to succeed. Hopefully it does, believe me, but there's no guarantee of that just because of the investment. On the flip side, you invested $150,000 to start a territory for something like Molly Maids, which is residential cleaning. Um, some of those franchisees have become very wealthy. That can be very lucrative, and it's not a massive investment. So no direct correlation necessarily there. So now one would think, okay, I've got X $100,000 to invest, but or I'm comfortable with that level of investment, from a risk standpoint, but I don't have $100,000, just sitting in the bank. Going back to the home analogy, it's very similar. If you think about a mortgage, most people aren't, you know, buying their $500,000 house by writing a check. You have a mortgage, and it's very similar with businesses. So you have obviously your liquid, investment. There'll be some cash, some money that you'll have to invest out of pocket down, just like a down payment on a home. But you can finance a good portion of it. And this is just a rule of thumb, somewhere in that quarter to a third would be out of pocket. But then the rest of it can be financed. And there's a variety of options there from a funding standpoint. Certainly personal savings, you got to start there. Again, that could be if it's a small investment, but that could be the whole investment, or it could just be the down payment. Partners, my lame joke is, the rich uncle. That always helps, but practically speaking, we're looking at other options here. That can be a home equity line of credit, potentially. I've seen that used. So taking equity from your home to help fund it. There are folks that if you have a portfolio outside of your retirement, you can take, instead of actually selling it and using the money, you can take a line of credit against the value of it. I've seen that done. So it's called a portfolio loan or securities-backed line of credit. So you're borrowing against the value of those securities and not just selling them. Seen that done. And there's the biggest one that's frankly should be on here is SBA loans, Small Business Administration loans through a bank that's backed by the government. That's a very common method. Good interest rates relative to going it alone or what they call non-traditional lenders. And they're with solid, reputable, known banks. So Small Business Administration loans. One that's not commonly known, I didn't know it before I started doing this myself, was you can take a portion of money from your own retirement account, whether that's a 401k or an IRA. My wife's a teacher, so that's a 403b, but any of those defined contribution plans, you can take a part of that to invest in a business, and you will not be penalized the 10% if you're younger than 59 and a half, nor will you be taxed. So if you took $50,000 out and you were 55 to go on a vacation, to travel the world for a month, you're going to get penalized the 10%, and you're also going to get taxed on it. If you invest in a business and do it the right way, there's a whole process for this, but and there's some fees to it, but no penalty and no taxation. The reason the government allows that, it's been approved and authorized by the IRS for the last 45 years, is because these businesses ultimately employ people, and then they'll pay, taxes, right? Business taxes. So it's a way for them to encourage business ownership. So it's a pretty unique, not well known, but very within the industry, very mainstream. This is, it's completely legal. There are these companies that have been doing this as a business for decades. So it's a good option. I think I mentioned this earlier, the correlations, right? So just to reiterate, don't confuse or assume that the more you invest, the more you'll make. So there's good and bad to that, obviously. It's good to know that you can have a relatively modest investment in the right company, and it can be lucrative. But it's also, a watch out for, just because it's a high investment doesn't guarantee a high return. I think this one's my favorite to a lot of light bulbs going on because I think people assume that whatever the business does, you need to either be experienced or an expert in it, and that's the vast majority of the time not true. So my examples are great clips, sort of no frills men's haircut, or I mentioned Meineke earlier. You would assume that franchisor wants people, barbers, or people that cut hair, or mechanics in those businesses, and the truth is they don't. They want business owners. You're going to hire barbers or hair cutters or whatever you want to call it, stylists, and you're going to hire mechanics as a Meineke owner. What they want in their owners are people that will use their system, that understand franchising, and that are comfortable not reinventing the wheel on every single system and process. That's why they're there. We've got that. We want you to use our system, and then take those transferable skills that you have from your career, whatever that may be, and apply them. So, and this is part of matching with the right business. What is my experience? Well, I'm great at identifying talent, hiring those people, training them, and then maintaining them. Huge skill. Think about that. And if you're going to own 5 great clips, like, retaining good employees is a skill. That's what they're looking for. Maybe you're really good at business development and sales. Okay, that can be very important if you own your own executive coaching business. You can go out and talk to people and shake hands and kiss babies and develop your business. That's a critical skill. So they're looking for those transferable things. They're going to train you on the basics of that particular business, and then you're going to hire people that actually execute it. So not looking for that specific skill necessarily of the owner themselves. All right, so maybe I'm interested in it. Is there more than one way to potentially be an owner? And the answer is yes. Most obvious and common is, I'm going to do this full time. I'm going to be an owner operator. This is something I'm fully involved in day to day. That doesn't mean that if it's a brick and mortar that you're physically there, at the counter or behind the line in a restaurant. But it does mean that you're working on that business full time. So you typically see folks that are, have gone through some sort of transition career, but they want to, they want to work full time. Okay, owner operator, you're going to be fully engaged and involved in the business at some capacity. It could be you are doing it, directly. We have a concept that goes, it's really the individual, the owner. They have a system or process to restore almost anything you can think of: leather, tile, glass. Instead of either buying something new, you can restore or repair it, and that's typically the owner doing that. That's just the model they have. But often it's you're working on the business, not directly in it full time. So you can either be an owner operator, or you certainly can own a business and be sort of more that executive level oversight, not even day-to-day involvement. This is far less common. There are specific and usually certain industries or types of businesses that are successful in this model. A lot of franchise companies will say, you have to be fully involved owner operator. We're not looking for people that are only going to spend 15 hours a week in managing a manager. So this is all part of the matching again. But there are concepts where the expectation, and most of their owners are not 50, 60-hour a week employees within the business, right? They're using this for a side play. They're going to manage a manager. They either have a job or potentially other, commitments to their time. So they're looking for owners that are more investors, will still oversee and be involved in the business. That key employee, managing the financials, managing a marketing spend, and making sure the business is is moving forward, but not, spending their full 8 hours every day. So owner operator, sort of semi absentee, and there's certainly gray area in between where you can, kind of start out fully engaged and involved in the business. And as you hire people and get comfortable in it, and there's probably an opportunity, years down the road to not be as involved day to day and be more semi-absentee. So there's some gray area in the middle, but generally speaking, you're kind of looking at an owner operator based focused concept, or one that's geared towards a semi-absentee ownership. And just to give you some real world examples of some of the folks that I've worked with, what did they do and what did they ultimately own? And you can see here, and it's, that's not always an obvious, um, connection either. But the key is, what were their goals? What were their skills? What were the skills they wanted to utilize? What was transferable? Um, and what were their interests? And you put all those things together, and you get something where, hey, this was a VP at an investment firm, but he was very interested in, positive child engagement types of concepts, and he ended up, owning up martial arts studios. So you can see some of the other examples here, but it's the point is that you got to really get deep on what you're good at, what you want, what your goals are, and then find the business that fits that. And sometimes it's not what you would expect or assume right out of the gate. It's not always that obvious. A term we use often in franchising, to give people an idea of how it's different, is that because you've got that other family, that franchise family, and this franchisor, you're in business for yourself. But you're not doing it by yourself. And the other key thing to realize, and one of the myths I could probably add here, is some folks think, well, okay, I'm a franchisee. The franchise company does all the work, and nothing could be further from the truth. The franchisee, the individual local owner, it's still your business. This is your business, just executing their model, but not doing it alone, having their support, and then the support and guidance of other franchisees in the system. So last section, there's a series of steps that I always recommend when people are trying to get their head around next steps, or how to, progress from here if you're interested. The real first key thing is separating what the business does from what the owner does. And my example on this is, I mentioned I worked for Panera Bread for a number of years. There were a number of very talented and smart and sharp bakers, that were really good what they did. And because they're passionate about it, they said, you know what, someday after I save up some money, I want to own my own bakery. And I said, that's great. That's a good goal. You should have, everybody should have a dream, for sure. My always guided folks, my clients, on understanding, owning something, and what it is you're actually doing are two different things. So if you own a bakery, you want to bake, you better be sure that you have somebody that's going to manage all the people. Who's going to hire the folks? Who's going to train them? Who's going to manage them? Who's going to check in the food orders every week? Who's going to manage payroll? All these business functions, right? Those are the functions of the owner, unless they have other people doing it. So, you can certainly own a bakery and bake and insert yourself in that role, but know that all the other business functions, somebody has to do that. So separating the function of the business from what you're going to do in it is a key consideration. Because the last thing you want to do is, assume that that's, what you love to do is what you're going to do, and then find you're busy doing all these other things, and then you're dissatisfied. So that's a key right out of the gate. The second part of it is why you're doing it and what's important to you. What is this going to fulfill? Is it about a challenge or more of a recognition that, I own this business in town, and everybody knows me because, I own the XYZ, whatever it is. That's fine. That's important to some people. Is it more straight, I'm building something for later, for retirement, building an asset? Is it more, and I hear this time and again, time for family and interests? So, the folks that work in certain industries or certain roles that traveled a lot and, working 80 hours a week for somebody else, and they're sick of it, and want something different. So it could be that family, work family balance sort of thing. Doesn't mean you're not going to work hard in this, but the two things are you can kind of decide if there are other people that are going to be involved, take some of that time away. And it's more flexibility on that time. When are you spending it? Oftentimes companies will tell you what you got to do, when and where. If you're working for yourself, you can sort of have a little bit more flexibility oftentimes on when things get done. So that's a control and flexibility thing. Community involvement. I've had a lot of folks. It's, look, I've lived in this town forever. I like it, but I don't even know anybody here. And I go to someplace else for the last 20 years to work. I want more of a connection. I want something more meaningful, something more community centric. Whatever it is, figure out why you're doing it. What is important to you? What is key that this is going to be different than what you've done before? The third leg is what am I good at and what do I want to use? I've had a number of folks that were, very successful in sales and business development. And I said, oh, that's great. That's a skill this business needs. And I'm thinking of for you. And they're like, but I'm burned out on that. I don't want to do that anymore. I don't want to sell anymore. I just want to operate something. That's critical to know that. So this is what are your transferable skills in addition to what are those skills you actually want to employ and use? So again, maybe you do love selling. So is that something you want the owner to be a requirement of for that business? Maybe you're just really good at providing a great experience. That's critical for a lot of service businesses. Google reviews. Oh my gosh, this guy came to my house and gave me options for my new floor and had it installed, and it was seamless and it was such a great experience. If you're somebody that's good at that, managing that whole process, again, hiring and managing people, or you just maybe you're really good logistically and operating something and managing whatever it is. Have a list of those key things that you're good at, and want to do. And then it becomes what matches, what kind of business utilizes those skills. And then finally, the fourth leg of the chair, what do I want my day to look like? Think about the business environment. Do I want 2 employees or am I comfortable with 20? What's my budget? Do I want a 3/4 zip kind of thing I got on here that says FranNet on it? Or, do I like, wear a suit and tie? I'm just comfortable in that, in my work environment. Um, is it a new industry? Do I like something, new and interesting, exciting, or something more established? Would I prefer to be delivering a service or something more tangible like a product? Do I want my customers to be sort of, the general public and user client, or would I prefer my customers to be other business owners? So B2B again. All these considerations are important because this is going to be, do I want it to be at home, home-based business, or would I prefer either an office or location? Because this is going to be your life and your day-to-day, understanding these characteristics is important. That was an abrupt end, but those last sort of 4 slides is really important to sort of chart your course going forward if you're considering it. what am I doing versus what the business does? What are my skills? What do I want my day to look like? And what environment would I thrive in?
Okay.
So just some things to think about.
That's great, Dana. Thank you so much. I have asked people to submit to chat if they had any questions. Um, and we unfortunately did not have any questions submitted. Is
Okay.
there a question that you're often asked that maybe wasn't included in your presentation today?
Yeah, I think one of them is, hey, is there a certain type of person or a certain industry that somebody's come from that, makes a business owner? Because I think one of the it could be a myth too, is that there's only a certain type of DNA of a person that could own a business. So if you think about folks that grew up in a business, somebody, an aunt or uncle, a parent owned, a bakery or whatever Main Street business, and they'll say as a 10-year-old, I remember working in the shop, that kind of thing. And those are the only people that can ever own a business. And that's not true. You certainly have to be comfortable, doing something different and maybe uncomfortable, but if you're willing to learn, take those transferable skills and apply them, really, anybody could be frankly could be a business owner. You got to know what you're getting into. You got to be comfortable with some level of, uncertainty. You got to know that it's not guaranteed, and 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 those sorts of things. But from a DNA standpoint or a background, there's not this one perfect avatar of, oh, if you're not that, you're not a business owner.
Okay. All right. Well, that was great. Thank you so much for giving your time to talk to our clients here today. And we thank you all for joining us. And we hope to see you again in the future. And I'm sure Dana will be in touch and have you back again. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Teresa and Boston Business Mentors. I appreciate the partnership.
Bye.